Hey everybody, Dustin DePirek here, columnist Andy Graham.
Hey.
I guess it's Saturday, so I guess this must be Columbus, and I must have covered football today.
Yeah, he was
know.
covering basketball in NYC last night. So
yeah, no, it's been a whirlwind. That was all kinds of fun.
it was like picking up a rock star at the airport today.
Keep going.
No, seriously. He came in and he thought, okay, I'm in an airport. I'm in a new city, and I see Andy.
Which one is it?
It must be Columbus.
This must be Columbus, Ohio, I suppose. Anyway. So yeah, I'm not going to bother telling you about my trip. There was, left the Garden, came pretty much straight here, but came here to see Ohio State beat Indiana 42-14, which is pretty much what you would have expected, considered Ohio State's number 4 in the country and making a play. Still has an outside shot at a national championship if something goes wrong for either Alabama or Florida State, and also if something happens to Baylor
Baylor's
tonight.
Behind right now.
They are behind. We can see a TV from here, and I haven't not known what's going on. We just got off deadline. But point being, Ohio State could have been more impressive, but Indiana, I think, kind of what stands out to you for this game for Indiana is I don't know they could have won this game. I don't know that it was conceivable that could have happened. But at the very least, they had a bunch of opportunities to make it a lot closer. I think they had 5 trips inside the Ohio State 30. They weren't all in the red zone, but 4 red zone chances. But got 2 touchdowns late, but missed a couple field goals. Also missed one that they were down
to the 2-yard line. They hit a couple field goals
line.
Off of the goalpost. To the left and to the right.
Yeah, Mitch Ewald, who's been phenomenal all year.
Luck on both of them.
In the snow.
They were good swings, as Kevin Wilson, the golfer, likes to say.
Exactly.
From distance, had plenty of distance, and an inch or two, and he's got 2 made field goals. But that's kind of how the day went for Indiana's offense. I mean, being an inch or 2 off was enough today to keep them frustrated against a very good Ohio State defense.
Yeah, I mean, there's 2 things that didn't work out well. I mean, for one, still without Tevin Coleman, and every single time they run the ball, it's more evident that that's a problem.
I agree.
Basically, I mean,
even though I thought Houston, D'Angelo always runs hard.
He does
really hard, actually. But Tevin gives you that little burst of explosion. What is a 3-yard game might be 5. What is a 5-yard game might be 15 if he squeaks through there. And it sounded like Kevin was fairly optimistic that he might get him back for Purdue because he said he looked a lot better toward the end of this week.
He did. It always sounded to me. I mean, I'm not going to say I don't think for a second that they were holding them out, but I think even all week last week and all week this week, it seemed like they were. There was never a time when they thought he wasn't coming back, but it seemed like they were thinking Purdue the whole way.
And I think it was that the nature of the injury lent itself to that.
Yeah, it's an ankle sprain. Seems like 2 weeks makes sense, but in Wilson's speak, he's the way he put it was he's the guy that you block a nickel and he gets you a dime.
And plus, he's a tailback that needs the speed. I mean, if you're going to play him and he's going to be more effective than the other guys, he needs to be healthy with the ankle.
Yeah, he needs to be able to push off. He needs to be able to explode. If he can't do that, he's not the type of guy.
Might as well play one of the other guys.
Yeah. So, and that obviously made a difference, though, because they didn't go to the run too often in the red zone. They didn't really feel confident in it to begin with. So they were throwing a lot, and they were off. Basically, they were off in a lot of throws.
Yeah, when it was 14-7, I mean, they had Cody Latimer wide open for what would have been a key first down inside the 15, and just missed the throw. Sudfeld Nate said that he tried to make it a little back shoulder throw and just missed it. And
that was really one of the bigger plays, one of the bigger misses. I think if he gets that one, it changes
the momentum. Instead, it becomes 21-0 when Ohio State blocks a punt and gets a gift touchdown set up off of that. As strange as it may sound, like Ohio State dominated the game as it should. It's one of the top. Definitely one of the top 5 teams in the country. I don't think there's any question of that. And maybe top 3, maybe you can argue back and forth. I think Florida State looks really good.
The unfortunate part about it for Ohio State is the Big Ten is just not as good.
And Indiana, but Indiana today actually could have hung in there for a while. Stats are for losers, as the phrase goes. But Indiana actually ended up with more first downs and was within 29 in total yards, I think, by the end of the game. And was within 20 or something at the end of the third quarter in total yards, and Ohio State had all 35 of the game's points. It was just kind of one of those days. But I think the big thing, and Kevin Wilson hit upon it in the postgame, he's absolutely right. Ohio State could run the ball, and Indiana couldn't.
Right.
Ohio State averaged 8 yards a carry, and Indiana averaged 3.1, I believe it was. And that's the ball game, especially when Ohio Stadium resembled a gigantic shaken snow cone thing.
Yeah.
I mean, it was not the best day for a passing team to try to throw.
No, but I think It wasn't as bad a day as last week.
No,
I would say.
no.
I mean, if you're gonna, I think if you're gonna throw the ball, you'd rather have this. It wasn't like totally you can't even see the field snow. I mean, there was some of it on it, but it's not as bad as when it's soaked and when it's pouring and when it's raining. It's miserable. You'd rather have snow. I mean, it kind of reminds you like when you were a kid, and you go out and you play snow football in your backyard. Like you remember how to do that, and it is less miserable, I think. I don't know. I mean, it was
hard to say because it looked like just a snow globe, didn't it?
It did. So, well, I could never tell because it actually looked like the snow was coming upwards at us.
I know it did. It was a very strange effect, but it's hard to say exactly from our perspective what it was like on the field.
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, and it did come up there, but I don't think it was as. I think we've seen it worse. I think Wisconsin was a lot worse, and they did throw it a little bit better, but they did just run into problems whenever they got in close. Part of that's Ohio State's defense, which is better even than its numbers. Ryan Shazier, who's got a really good chance of being Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year, was out of his mind. 20 tackles, 5 for loss, and a sack, pass breakups. He was all over the place.
And a lot of those hits were.
I think he was wearing Christian Bryant's number, if I'm not mistaken.
He was.
And which was, a tribute on senior day. I think as Christian's out with an ankle injury and just played again like just a complete and total madman. And he was
and when he hits you, you stay hit.
Yeah, big time.
He's one of those kind of guys. And Roby's the same way.
Yeah.
And Roby had 10 tackles. They got some very, very talented guys on this team. And not trying to build that up too much, but, I mean, it is what it is. And they are who they are.
Right.
And actually, Indiana this could have been like a 48-20 game pretty easily. I mean, it was Indiana had the capacity to score some points and didn't. And part of that was due to Ohio State, but part of that was due to Indiana just not making a play.
Yeah, no, very much didn't. No, I mean, defensively, again, like I've said before, I mean, you can only expect so much out of this defense.
And Kofi, you said we got about everything we could expect from them. They created 3 turnovers, got a couple other stops, kept putting us in pretty good field position, and frankly, we just didn't capitalize.
Yeah.
And he was right.
I mean, again, obviously there are problems. You're not going to, we can go over this 1,000 times. I mean,
but by Indiana's defense
is not very high standards.
And given Ohio State came in averaging 49-plus points a game, Indiana actually held them below their scoring average and below their total yardage average for the season, which Indiana's defense hasn't done very much against any opponent this year in terms of holding below averages.
Yeah.
And so, no, it was a reasonable
It was the first time in about 4 weeks that they had to give up 500.
That's right. And so, given the potency of this Ohio State team, and it is extremely potent. Then and there were some explosion plays early in the first couple of drives. After that, not as many.
Yeah.
And so look, once again, everything's relative.
Relative.
By
this is not high standards.
Defensive standards, it was a reasonable performance.
Yeah.
And the offense didn't play well enough to take advantage of that early.
Yeah, and this is and that's been this way for a couple of different games. I mean, there have been Indiana is in the position where this is their team. If the defense gets them a couple stops, offense has to be able to get it done because it's just not a very good defense. And you feel lucky when they get off the field.
I remember the Navy game was awful early and the defense was pretty much awful all day. But one of the reasons it was 17-0 early was that the offense wasn't playing and threw a pick 6 and stuff. And so when the offense doesn't play, it's very hard for this. Doesn't play well. It doesn't.
Right.
Doesn't convert when it has chances to score. This team is going to have a real tough time, winning games or staying competitive against a team like Ohio State.
This was one of the more, in terms of the quarterback thing, this was one of the more interesting ones to me in the sense that it really kind of felt like, and they weren't always wrong necessarily, but they were kind of throwing darts a little bit at the board at this one in terms of what was, when do we use this guy, when do they use that guy. I thought this was, I didn't think this way necessarily going in because, again, I didn't think the snow was going to be as much of an issue. But when Trey got going, he looked a lot, I thought he looked better than Nate today. Neither one looked great. In either case, neither one looked great the last 2 weeks. I mean, I thought Trey had a little bit of the edge today just because he was running a little bit and they weren't getting any running game otherwise from anybody but Trey. Trey, I think, led the team in rushing with 79. Nobody else had more than 36.
That's right.
So he was kind of one guy out there that was really giving him anything. So Sudfeld threw a little bit. I mean, 224 and 2 touchdowns, 25 for 41. He wasn't horrible.
He did throw a pick, and he actually came on
got sacked 4 times.
He did, but he came on better toward the end of the game.
Yeah.
He was playing better at late than he was early.
Yeah, and of course course, in that case, they were already up 42-0.
True, and all the points scored at the end were moot. But at least they scored them.
Yeah,
I mean,
and so it continues to become a weirder situation, I think, with every week.
Yeah, I mean, I really genuinely think that this coming off season, and I totally understand why it is the way it is now, and I'm not.
It's a tough call.
I'm not meaning to sound judgmental about that, but I do think it would be helpful in the off season if they do determine a starter and give that guy a lot of reps, because whomever they choose needs to get better and needs to get more consistent and needs to really lead the team next year. It's gonna. We all thought this team was maybe a year away in this sense. They're still young, even though they're experienced. And we looked at how many guys.
But we thought this was a bowl team because of
the eight home games, and it obviously could have been a bowl team. They had a chance to break through and they didn't break through.
Yeah.
But next year was the year that everybody kind of looking at this team said that's the year that they really, that's kind of the year to point for in terms of when this team will kind of mature.
Because there's some level of defensive maturation there needs to be.
And there needs to be. And we're thinking a lot of those freshmen on defense will be sophomores. And,
right.
And that was the year that people were kind of pointing. But you only have 6 home games next year. So people were hoping for a breakthrough this year. It didn't happen.
Right.
And frankly, there was a lot of, it's a disappointing season. It just is. And it was close to being a bowl season, but it wasn't. They were maybe one play against Minnesota from being a bowl team. Michigan knew it was in a game. I think if the Navy game goes 5 minutes longer, Indiana would have overtaken them. There's any number of games, that could have turned out differently. But I think that this is a disappointing season. But they still have a bucket to play for. That's kind of what I said in the column. And not a whole lot of people outside the state might care, and a lot of the people inside the state might not care. But that still would be 5 wins, which is one more than last year. It would be 3 conference wins, which was one more than next year. And that's something that you could still sell to recruits. And after a while, when all the memories of exactly what happened in the seasons fade, the numbers remain.
Yeah.
The numbers remain. And if the numbers have an upward trend, that's something that's better than the alternative.
They don't have negative momentum right now, but they don't necessarily have as much positive momentum.
Unless they lose next week.
That would be
disappointment.
I just don't see it.
No, but
I just don't see it that Purdue team.
Stranger things have happened.
That's true. I mean, maybe I just haven't watched them, but the numbers I've seen, but they've also played worse teams.
They have.
I mean, they're going to score some points against Indiana because I think they could score some points against Indiana by accident, but I don't see them stopping Indiana. I get that they've been bad for 2 weeks, but they also played Wisconsin and Ohio State that are massively just better than them.
Well, I will say this. I mean, if Indiana has Tevin Coleman back and can run the ball,
it
will be helpful because we don't, once again, the weather, nobody wants to make excuses and use the weather as an excuse, and I don't want to use that as an excuse either, but weather, like they saw at Wisconsin and today, does affect a passing team.
It does.
And you have to be able to run the ball.
Yeah, to be able to run the ball.
And so we don't know what the weather's going to be next week. We'll see.
No. I'm going to cut it off because it's like 12:40. But anyway, thanks, everybody.
Thanks.